If you've dwelled in the anime, manga, or gaming space online, you've probably heard of the term visual novel. But what is a visual novel really? Some say it's a book, some say it's a video game, some say it's neither of those things. So what really is it? Let's see what Google says. A visual novel, often abbreviated as VN, is a form of digital semi-interactive fiction. Visual novels are often associated with and used in the medium of video games, but are not always labeled as such themselves. Let's dissect that sentence into simpler terms. It's a novel, which means it's a narrative, which also unfortunately means that there's reading involved. It's visual because on top of the narrative, there's character designs and scenery to go with it. It's semi-interactive because there's a choice mechanic intertwined in the narrative, which means that at certain points in your reading, you'll be prompted to make a choice which affects the outcome of the story.
This is what makes visual novels stand out from other mediums that carry a narrative, the ability to make a choice. Now, why does that matter? How would making choices make my experience different? Well, for one, it allows the creator of the narrative to express all their ideas and all the possible outcomes of the story and the events that happen within it. And to the reader, this means a huge narrative playground to go through. To put it simply, imagine a line that represents a storyline. The start of the line is the beginning of the story, and the end is, well, the end of it. Now, let's say the writer of the storyline says, "Damn, what if the main character did this instead?" Suddenly, a new branch of the storyline is created for the reader to go through with its own events and its own ending, and you can keep branching off like this for as long as the creator wants to. It's like pizza, you got the basics, the dough, the tomato, the cheese, and you can just throw stuff onto it and see if it sticks. Basically, same shit with a twist to it. Sometimes it sticks to it and it feels like you're piecing together all these ideas by going through all the different outcomes, creating depth to the experience, not making it feel one-dimensional like it usually can be, bringing it to life. But of course, sometimes it doesn't stick and it's an insult to God's green earth, which ruins the flow of the experience. It's very much a double-edged sword. So to sum up, a visual novel is basically a picture book on crack cocaine. Next thing I want to talk about is time. Now, time is very important, and in the context of entertainment mediums these days, usually shorter means better. People are either too busy to go through certain types of content because they're too long, or their attention span is that of a goldfish, one or the other. Now, why does that matter? Well, visual novels are usually one of those certain types of content. We can take a practical example of this and visit vndb.org, which is the visual novel database, and by sorting the visual novels by highest rated, we can see that most of these go into AAA video game level territory when it comes to time taken to complete them. That's because it takes time for the creator to build up that unique selling point of a massive narrative playground we talked about and for the reader to go through it. That kind of narrative gives us depth, multi-dimensional characters, a world that can feel alive more so than in other mediums, but true depth takes time to realize itself. And that's one of the major reasons why visual novels are very much a niche form of fiction. And the other reason is the stigmas surrounding visual novels. They're there for good reason, mind you. Most visual novels are dog shit because a lot of them are just hentai but with reading, which makes zero sense. They really expect someone horny to read and digest dialogue and not just jack off. Anyway, another reason is that they're quite easy to make from a video game standpoint. Anyone can make one really, which sets the entry bar to creation very low, which in return means you get a lot of repeated ideas or just pure trash thrown around, which makes the good of the medium stand out much less. And the last reason I think is the language barrier. Visual novels, or at least the big name ones, come from Japan, and Japanese studios typically believe that there isn't a market for their work outside of Japan, keeping their stories in Japanese. One very good practical example of this is Fate Stay Night, which is one of the most popular visual novels out there. It still doesn't have an official English translation 19 years after its release. All of this culminates into a niche genre with a fading industry behind it by the looks of it. Now that I feel like we rounded off the genre very nicely with all its what's, whys, and why nots, I think we can now start wondering what does it mean to us as consumers of the genre. Why should I choose to read a picture book with anime girls instead of playing a video game or watching an actual anime or doing whatever else to waste my time on this planet? Well, I can only speak mostly subjectively about this, but it's a very special way to experience a story. A way that can linger in your mind while you're reading through it, keeping you possessed by the narrative, wondering what's going to come of it, or a way that can just be a relaxing Thursday night serving an assassin for hire in a cyberpunk post-dystopian dive bar listening to his stories. It's very versatile, it can captivate, but it can also relax in ways other mediums can't. And after you're done with a story like that, you just feel empty. Suddenly everything that captivated you is gone and resolved from your mind and you don't really know what to make of it. It often feels either melancholic that it's over or just jarring that a story of that size just ended like that. And it's hard to digest an experience like that into concise words that can easily form an equally concise opinion about it because it put you through so many views, perspectives, and events. Not many things gave me a feeling like that, and the ones that did, it wasn't so apparent as it is here. It brings you along for a ride where it hits you with everything it's got, and then it leaves you standing there perplexed. That is, if you read a good visual novel. See, the problem is that finding one that will put you through this experience is somewhat of a task on its own. You can't really try it like an anime where you'll watch an episode or two and see if you're into it. The flow is entirely different and it doesn't allow for that. The abstract descriptions help, but a 5 sentence description of a 50-hour-long story can only do so much. The individual community reviews and opinions you may see online aren't reliable either. They're usually very subjective and vary too much for you to reach a conclusion on whether it's a good idea to read it or not. Since there's far too many places where personal preferences will deviate, and because most people who write these reviews are very special to say the least. My advice is to trust the numbers. See the ratings and popularity on vndb.org and pick one out that sticks out to you from the top. And that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, adaptations. Now, usually adaptations have a bad rap between some visual novel folks, but we have already established that these people are very special. Anime adaptations of visual novels aren't bad in most cases, it's just that these people expect something that they can't get from it. When you watch an adaptation, you will generally get the story of the visual novel you wanted and expected, but that doesn't mean you will get the same experience as you would reading a visual novel. The ability to make a choice is gone. Certain routes in the story might get animated over others, and all that time the visual novel takes to read and digest has to be compressed into a much shorter time frame, which of course means that a lot of detail or scenes will be lost altogether. The traits that make a visual novel are lost. Does this mean adaptations are bad? No. It's better that they're made this way because turning 50 hours of reading and all that detail into a million anime episodes certainly wouldn't work better. Anime adaptations allow more people to experience a story without the experience of reading a visual novel, which to a lot of people is probably tedious either way. After all that, would I recommend reading at least one visual novel to everyone? No. You read a visual novel for the story first and then for the experience of reading a visual novel second. So unless you find a story you really like that doesn't have a worthy adaptation in your mind, then absolutely, go for it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.